Anyway, I'll let you guys take it from here.
Jane, why don't you start?
Yeah, I just texted and emailed Trey another link to the presentation, so I do hope he will come. He's another great, very knowledgeable volunteer with our group. So I've been in TWIST about 2 years now. I moved here from Dallas, Texas. And when I was in Dallas, I was very actively involved in a very rewarding and highly productive project educating high school students about the importance of voting and then getting them registered. Listening to them over the years, it became abundantly clear to me that many of them were not interested in voting because they didn't think their vote was going to matter. And so over time, it's become more and more clear to me also that it's not just about getting out the vote. It's also about doing something about fixing the way we're voting. So I heard about ranked choice voting recently, and I was just so happy to hear that Washington State is really thinking about this, and there will be legislation that can further this effort. Fair Vote Washington has been instrumental in helping me better understand ranked choice voting and how it works. And so I'm really happy to be with you all this evening and help share what I've learned. That's it.
So thanks, Jane. I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from Bellingham, Washington, and I was never very political. And then right after the 2016 election, I was so upset by the toxic politics nationally that I couldn't sleep. And then I remembered my brother telling me about ranked choice voting, and I saw what a difference that could make in the way politics is run. And I saw it could make politics a lot more functional than it is now. And I've been working for ranked choice voting, volunteering for ranked choice voting ever since. And honestly, I do it because it helps me sleep. So, so I guess Trey's having trouble logging in, but hopefully he'll be here soon. I just emailed him the link again. So, but we'll start with the presentation, and he's pretty nimble. When he gets here, he'll join us. I'm not that nimble though. I have gotten myself off of the right screen. And here we go. I am going to share my screen, and I'm going to, well, without Trey, it'll be a little slower, but we'll be good. We'll make it.
He just showed up. I just admitted him. So
oh, awesome. Great. Good. It's good to have somebody with he has more technical know-how than I do. So that'll be helpful. So welcome to ranked choice voting. We introduced ourselves. Trey, are you here? Can you introduce yourself? He will, just a second. So
I see. Sorry, my microphone was actually on mute, so I've been talking for the last minute or two and wondering why no one could hear me.
Okay.
Talking me up saying I'm technologically proficient when that's a little too generous. So I'm a longtime advocate of ranked choice voting. I've been a supporter of it for nearly a decade at this point. But in the most recent presidential primary election, it kind of came to a much higher kind of top of mind point for me, when it seemed very clear that a lot of people were basically just talking past each other, and we weren't actually getting a lot of traction on actually resolving any issues we care about. And that kind of led me to look a little bit more at it from a systemic systems type level, where the kind of incentives that we currently operate under in first past the post kind of by effect lead us down this road of political dysfunction. And so that's what got me initially excited about ranked choice voting.
Thanks, Trey. Yes, it's I blame the people less when I realize what the system is rewarding. So, okay, Trey, tell us, what is ranked choice voting?
So you're going to hear, a lot more detail as we go through the rest of this presentation. But in short, ranked choice voting is exactly what it sounds like. You rank your choices when you vote. And so we can, look at this kind of like, mock or like fake election where we're, ranking, kind of like different types of chocolate. And we want to essentially choose the one that, wins the election. In, this tally vote here, we see that there's, 4 options, and every, person filling out a ballot can get 4 choices. And it's a relatively simple, kind of like low friction change to how we actually do our votes.
Okay, so we're going to start by participating in an election. You're going to participate in an election. Trey, would you drop the link in the chat? So our candidates are pecan pie, apple pie, pumpkin pie, and lemon meringue pie. You're going to get a ballot that looks like this, and you fill out your first choice in the first column, the second choice in the second column, and so on. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I would like for you all to look in the chat, and Trey has just put a link in. So if you'll go to the chat at the bottom of the screen, click chat, and the window will come up. Trey has put in a link, and it'll say fall pies at the end there. So if you click that link, a ballot will pop up for you, and you can vote in this very important election about fall pies. Is that working for everyone? Does anyone have any trouble getting to that link?
I'm not able to get to it somehow.
Okay, did you find the what Trey posted in the chat?
Yes, I did.
And when you click that, nothing happens. Any ideas, Trey?
Now it's finally popping up.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Hallie. You voted. Awesome. And campaigning is okay if anyone wants to campaign for a particular pie.
Don't even rank rhubarb. It's objectively the worst.
Are there no gluten-free?
Is this the rhubarb pie election?
Oh, I was just saying that facetiously.
Oh, okay.
I just have no love left for rhubarb. I'm not.
Okay.
I don't believe, though, to answer the question about gluten-free. I don't believe any of the options explicitly say gluten-free.
Okay. Oh, yeah. No, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Has everyone voted?
Yep.
Anyone still working on? So we're going to go through how this is counted. So remember what at least your first and second choice were, and I will show you how a ranked choice voting election is tallied. So I think you all can see the ballot here, right? And we'll go over, close out your ballot, submit your ballot, come back to the Zoom screen, and we'll all look at the results together. So you'll notice over here, we have, oh, somebody just voted. Oh, somebody else just voted. Awesome. So we have about 200 votes in this election so far, and that's because we've been using it in other presentations. It's Trey and Jane and I did not stuff the ballot box. But so in a ranked choice election, we're looking for one candidate to cross this green dotted line, the finish line, which is 50%. And in this election, 50% would be 105.5 votes. So none of the candidates have that yet. If this were a single winner, pumpkin pie would win with 28%. But it's a ranked choice election. So what we do, this round one, there's no winner, no majority winner. So we're going to eliminate the lowest ranking candidate, which is lemon meringue. Now, 40 people voted for lemon meringue. And even though lemon meringue is eliminated, those voters still get a voice in the election. So those 40 votes and only those 40 votes are going to move to their second choice. The other 3 candidates keep all their first choice votes. So I'm going to click the blue arrow and see what happens on round 2. So, oh, the lemon meringue people, they broke much for almost half of them went to apple pie. And now apple pie is pulling ahead, but we still don't have a majority winner. So, oh, this is interesting. We have a tie for second place. Pumpkin pie and pecan pie each have 67 votes. So when you have a small election, ties happen more frequently. Ranked choice voting has an interesting way of breaking a tie in a second round. In a second round, we can look back at the first round and see who had the strongest support in the first round, who had the most first choice votes in the first round, and that would be pumpkin pie. See, the yellow line is a little farther over than the red line. So hopefully this app will do it correctly. This is not a very smart app. Let's see what happens. Dumb app. Well, it broke the tie incorrectly, but apple pie came out a clear winner. I think if it might have happened the same way the other way. So now apple pie is way over the finish line. Let's go back to the beginning and look at it again. So lemon meringue is in last place. The other 3 are pretty close. And we will eliminate lemon meringue and let the second choices for those voters show up. And we still don't have a tie in the second round, so we'll go to a third round, and apple pie wins. Are there any questions about that?
Well, I have some questions about if people do things like, for example, if I only vote for 2 of the 4, or if I vote twice for first choice or whatever. I mean, how do those kinds of voting aberrations factor into this?
Good question. So this app won't let you vote for the same item twice, but if you're filling in squares and you vote for the same one twice, your second vote for that candidate won't count. If that candidate's eliminated, that candidate is eliminated. So if you're going to another round and you have a vote, your third choice vote is for the candidate who was eliminated in the first round, your vote won't count. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, but so if Okanagan County were to adopt ranked choice voting, we would still be voting, I am assuming, at home by mail,
Right.
not by some sort of app on our machine, on our digital device. So I assume if I'm voting at home by mail, I would be able to make that mistake and vote twice for pumpkin pie or whatever. So I'm just curious what's going to happen there. Does it mean my vote is gone, is eliminated, or what's the process there?
Well, for one thing, our education campaign would make that clear, that if you vote for pumpkin pie first, second, third, and fourth, it's the same as just voting once, right?
Okay.
So the education campaign needs to make that clear. And then if you vote for only 2 candidates, if those 2 candidates are both eliminated, you don't have another choice.
Okay.
And it looks like, whoops, what happened? There we go. It looks like, looks like their 4 votes were turned in with no down here with no votes at all. And as we go through, sometimes we see, let's see. So there's one, now there are 5 inactive ballots. And so someone only picked lemon meringue and nothing else. And that's okay, you can do that. It's like voting in the primary and not coming back to vote in the general election. So another name for ranked choice voting is instant runoff. So it's like having a runoff, right, in the same election.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
If they were to do this in a primary, how does that work out? So
That's
is
a great question. It can, if you have a small number of candidates, like 5 or less, it can take the place of the primary. And Utah is using this in 24 cities because they are eliminating a lot of the primary elections and saving a lot of money. Yeah. So, oh,
Meaning they're literally not holding a primary election. They're just having everyone do a ranked choice ballot in the general election. Is that what you mean?
yes, exactly.
I think if we implemented that here, we might end up with dozens of candidates for some races. So we might have to do like what Alaska's done, which has a primary, but then they forward 4 candidates to the general election as opposed to 2.
Perfect, Dean. Exactly. So the bill that we have in the legislature, the local options bill, allows for a final 5. So if we have 5 or more candidates in a race, like, mayor of Seattle or governor, then we have a winnowing primary because, 45 candidates is a lot to rank. So we'd have a winnowing primary, ranked choice primary, and then a top 5 and a ranked choice general election. Yes,
Very good.
exactly. See, can I get back to where I want to go? Excuse me.
I have a wondering more than the question. I'm thinking of the primary we just had in Okanagan County. There were 8 Republicans and 1 Democrat running, and the Republicans split themselves up, and Newhouse and Doug White came out on top. And if all those Republicans had had a second choice and a third choice and a fourth choice, would Doug have made it through? I'm trying to do this with ties and doesn't and English at the same time. I'm better on the English side, but yeah, I'm trying to think. So somebody voted for Cult. That took a vote away from Newhouse, but in the second round, they voted for Newhouse.
Right. Well, the top 5, if there was a large field, the top 5 would go to the general election. And ranked choice voting doesn't guarantee that one party or another will win the election. What it does is find the candidate that most people are happy with. Most of the voters. Yeah. There's another way of electing multiple candidates at the same time in a district, having a bigger district and having 3 representatives and electing representatives proportionally. And that's what gets the minority group representation. And that's what did you call it, Trey? Advanced ranked choice voting? I think that's what you call it.
Yeah, basically ranked choice voting 201. If the presentation we're giving now is ranked choice voting 101, then there's a slide we have a little bit later on that goes into the more advanced plurality type voting system.
Right. Cambridge, Massachusetts uses it, as does East Point, Michigan, and Albany, California. Oh, why am I? I'm sorry. I'm a little bit lost here on my slideshow, but I will find it. I know I can do it. Why is it not here?
Is there a website or someplace where someone could go and just like play with making ranked choice, scenarios?
Yes, there are several. The one that you have a link to, which is RCV Tally,
Okay.
is one, and there are several others. we'll find those and give them to you at the end. Okay.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I have fun doing it.
Okay.
Okay, so we ranked our pies. And now I say, why change the way we vote? So we're going to dig in and talk about specific problems about the way we vote now. So in this election, the candidate with the most votes wins. Milk chocolate. This is pretty straightforward. And what could go wrong? Well, spoiler alert, if another candidate enters the race, say dark chocolate enters the race, more candidates should be a good thing, right? More choices should be a good thing. But what could happen is dark chocolate could peel off some of milk chocolate's support and throw the election to candy corn, which only has 45%, which probably sounds like a lot even. But so the chocolate vote is split. Candy corn has won this election, even though most voters preferred some kind of chocolate. So the spoiler effect is a form of vote splitting where the candidate can win with less than half the votes.
Yeah, and so now looking at, a kind of like real situation back from 2016 in the Washington state treasurer primary elections. Washington state actually attempted to fix the problem of, the spoiler effect in a almost, you could call it an overly simplistic way, where we kind of switched over to this, top two primary election. But this idea of the spoiler effect or vote splitting isn't actually truly solved by moving to a top two primary, because all it really does is move the vote splitting problem out from the general election back to the primary. And so back in 2016, there were two Republican candidates and three Democrat candidates. And collectively, the Democrat candidates had 51.57% of the vote, whereas the Republicans had 48.42% of the vote. However, the two, if Kit, you can go to the next slide, the two Republican candidates, because they weren't splitting the votes in their party as much, were actually the top two candidates in terms of total voters. And so what that meant is despite the fact that over 50% of the voters in the election didn't vote for either of these candidates and wouldn't vote for either of these candidates if they had the kind of full choice of all the candidates, all of the Democrats ended up actually getting eliminated, and voters were left with the choice between one Republican and another. And so in this particular instance, this kind of top two primary solution actually ended up working against the Democrats.
And this can shut out either party. The Republicans got shut out of the lieutenant governor last election, and they weren't particularly happy about that either.
Yeah, and so what that effectively means, and just last point on this one, is that in this first past the post system, even if you have a top two primary type system, what it effectively ends up causing is that whenever similar candidates run in the same race, they essentially punish and weaken each other, causing all of them to lose. And Don, I see that you've raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Well, I do, but it's a little bit different topic, but I'm aware that the city of Seattle voters right now are being asked to choose between ranked choice voting and a different kind of voting change. I don't remember what it's called. And the city council, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure you are aware of this. The city council didn't like what was put forward by an initiative or whatever. So they dropped a ranked choice voting option into this upcoming ballot. I was just wondering if you could speak to those two different kinds of voting changes.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. We do have a slide on exactly this in a little bit. So if you don't mind, we'll save it till then. But yeah, happy to get into it. And the other kind of voting that you're talking about here is called approval voting.
Right, that's right. Approval voting.
But yeah, great question. We'll get to it in about 10 slides or so.
And another problem with the way we're voting is the potential for wasted votes. I'm sure you all remember this election, the 2020 presidential primary. There was a large field of Democrats. but the last day or so before the election, a lot of them, including Buttigieg, Warren, Klobuchar, Yang, dropped out after ballots had already been mailed in. If you or anyone you know voted for a candidate who dropped out after mailing in a ballot, would you give us a wave or mention it in the chat? Anyone? Well, I'm sure there are some of you that fit that description. Certainly fit my description. And so there was a lot of company in Washington State during that primary, and it cost nearly 400,000 Washingtonians their vote, which was more than 25% of the votes, which were essentially wasted. With ranked choice voting, these voters could have listed their backup choice so that their vote would still count if their first choice dropped out. 5 other states did use ranked choice voting in that election, and they include Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada.
And so the point that we're really trying to hammer home in this presentation is that compared to first past the post, ranked choice voting gives voters a much stronger voice and more choices in their election to really vote for their preference, but not risk their vote essentially being quote unquote wasted. And so taking the example of Minneapolis has used ranked choice voting since 2009, and the exit polls that have been taken since then show that their voters just overwhelmingly like it. And in places that use ranked choice voting, we tend to see more women, people of color, third parties, and independents running in elections without there being the kind of very real fear of essentially being spoiler candidates that end up leading with the least preferred candidate actually taking the election. It essentially leads to voters having a much more kind of real choice or vote in the election, because they can still vote for their favorite candidates even if that candidate doesn't stand a great chance of winning, because the voters have essentially their backup choices that would still be affected. And so looking at this map here, it's a map of the US showing all the states that are using ranked choice voting at some level of election, be it federal, presidential, primaries, local party, or military or overseas ballots. For example, Maine uses ranked choice voting for federal elections and the presidential primary. And Alaska used it for the first time very, very recently. You probably saw a number of news articles about it. In lots of other states, though, it's used for these other kinds of elections. And so on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how it's working so far. And so you can see a number of statistics kind of pasted up on the board here. These were all exit polls taken shortly after a place started using ranked choice voting for the first time. And so a couple of highlights: 70% of voters approved of ranked choice voting in their exit polls. 71% of voters ranked multiple candidates, and a whopping 90% of voters, when asked, would say that they understood ranked choice voting and that it was simple to use. A common kind of diss against ranked choice voting that people less informed no matter chime in with commonly is, oh, it's complicated, oh, voters won't understand it. And to be frank, that's baloney. Voters and people rank things all the time. We do it in your day-to-day life. To assume that people can't do that in an election is basically just selling voters sugar.
So some of you may have followed the recent ranked choice election in Alaska. It was held this past August to fill the vacant seat in the US House of Representatives. There were 3 candidates in this election, left to right: Mary Peltola, Sarah Palin, and Nick Begich. Voters could rank their first choice, second choice, and third choice in this election. This is how it went. In the ranked choice election, we start by counting the number of first choice votes given to each candidate. Every voter gets 1 first choice. No candidate got over 50%, so that triggered a second round. For round 2, the candidate with the least votes is eliminated. So Nick Begich was eliminated, but his voters still had a say in the final result. So let's see who they chose as their second vote. Some of Nick Begich's voters chose Sarah Palin second, and some of them chose Mary Peltola. The interesting thing in Alaska was this: even though Nick Begich is a Republican, his voters didn't all vote along party lines. Most of them wanted Sarah Palin, but a significant number of them preferred Mary Peltola. Those voters pushed Mary over the finish line, and Alaska now has their first Native American congressperson.
And so, as I, kind of alluded to at the, like in my, intro, what a really kind of like big thing that got me, excited about ranked choice voting was the dynamic that I kind of saw increasingly happen in elections after, 2015 or so, where we really saw this just massive increase in negative campaigning. Now, to be clear, negative campaigning has always been a thing, and it's always been this kind of like kind of corrosive effect on the kind of discourse around politics. But ranked choice voting really, really, really discourages negative campaigning and encourages a more kind of like civil issue-based campaign. Because I mean, just think about it. Like, if you imagine you were a candidate and you were going around canvassing and you knock on somebody's door and they open it up, you're talking to them and you're like, hey, I would love to, get your vote, this upcoming election. And they tell you, sorry, no can do. X candidate, it already has my vote. I love them. They're the best. They're, they're perfect, or, whatever. At that point, in a first past the post system, you're, as a candidate, essentially incentivized to then go on the attack and tell them all the reasons why this other candidate isn't good. But in a ranked choice voting system, you don't have to do any of that. In fact, doing that is not really actually going to help you. You're likely just going to get that voter against you and hating you. Instead, in a ranked choice voting system, once you hear that this other person already is sold on this other candidate, you can just accept it and say, okay, I understand. Well, I've got a lot of overlap, with this other candidate. Here are the things that, that they and I both, support. Can I count on your second choice vote? And so in these pictures that we're showing here, these are pictures of candidates who are, opponents in the election they're running in, and yet they're able to still, maintain civility, still able to, have these, positive, photo ops together, because they're not spending all their time outside just tearing each other down.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And in fact, this, again, going back to the recent election in Alaska, if you all followed that, Mary Peltola did choose to run a more inclusive campaign to get those crossover votes. Palin, you probably are aware, is quite polarizing. And she did get some crossover votes, but she did not get enough to win the election. So at this point, are there more questions before we go on?
I'm ready to show the video. So this is a minute-and-a-half video, just a review.
Politics is tearing us apart, and it's because elections aren't working for most of us. Here's why. In the US, each of us can vote for the candidate we like the most, but whenever more than 2 candidates are running to win 1 seat, it's possible for most voters to hate whoever wins. Because of this split vote, politicians can ignore the will of most voters and still win. Ranked choice voting gives you the freedom to select a backup choice to prevent that from happening. Let's say a group uses ranked choice voting to decide what to eat for dinner tonight. Each voter selects their favorite dish, but also has the option to choose backup dishes. If one food receives more than half the votes, it wins, just like in any other election. But let's get to dessert, where the competition is more fierce. What if no ice cream flavor has more than 50% of the vote? Under a normal race, vanilla would win, even though a majority of voters didn't pick it. With ranked choice voting, the flavor with the fewest votes is eliminated, and voters who chose that flavor as number 1 will have their votes count for their next choice. Everyone gets a say, no one wastes their vote, and the winner is the flavor that the largest number of people agreed upon. That's ranked choice voting. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You get more voice and more choice, and that makes elections better for all of us.
Okay, so Hallie was asking about, I think you were asking about how does a party that's a minority in a district get representation? And this is it. So Trey, tell us about fair representation.
Yeah, so fair representation is what I was kind of like, at least the specific part of it here of proportional RCV is what I was referring to earlier when I was saying like there's ranked choice 101, then ranked choice 201. Proportional ranked choice voting is where the end result of the election, or when the election itself is for multiple positions, essentially the voters are able to still rank their choices, but when the votes are tallied, they're tallied slightly differently. They're tallied in such a way where the majority kind of like stances or majority parties still take a number of seats, but the minority parties still get some, essentially a proportional amount of representation, proportional to the amount of votes or support that they actually got. And so like when I say that there's proportional representation, it's fair to ask like, well, what does that actually mean? Well, usually 90% of the voters they have at least one council member that they support when proportional RCV is used, because their overall kind of like position or stances are still represented in the end election results. So it also kind of like incentivizes or like disincentivizes things like gerrymandering, for example, because the overall kind of like outcome is still geared off of proportionality to the entire voting body. And I think you had something you wanted to.
Yeah, I want to say the way Cambridge has been using it since 1941, and the way they do it in Cambridge is all the candidates for city council run together on one ballot in a pool. And so instead of electing these council members one race at a time, they're all running in a pool. The voters get a ranked choice ballot. They get to rank their top, I don't know how many they get to rank, but they don't have to rank the entire list. The voters rank their choices, and the top 9 get seats on the council. And so it's because the city votes on all the candidates in the pool as a whole, there's no drawing districts and no arm wrestling about district lines. And that's how gerrymandering can't happen. So the Fair Representation Act is in Congress right now. It's not really going anywhere, but it would bring proportional ranked choice voting to congressional districts. And the city of Portland is considering this for their city council this coming election. So why should we make this change? It actually has bipartisan support. Gurmay Zahali is one of the King County Council members who put the ranked choice voting on the coming ballot. Chris Vance is the former chair, Washington State Republican Party, and he says it'll help fix some of the problems with our two-party system. Elizabeth Warren says it makes sure that the person that most people want to win ends up winning.
So in Washington State, legislation that was considered in 2022 didn't pass. But these bills are going to be reintroduced again in 2023. The local options bill would allow local jurisdictions from county level down to use RCV if they want to use that option. The presidential primaries bill would bring RCV voting statewide to the presidential primary race. So these bills will be reintroduced soon, and your emails and online support, if you decide that you do support it, will make a big difference.
So on
Also, go ahead.
I'm just curious, at the local options level, would that decision be made by the voters of Okanagan County, for example, or would the county commissioners make that change? How would that potentially unfold at the county level?
Kit, can you take that one? I believe
Yeah.
it would be the voters that would be deciding that.
The voters would vote on it, and it would come to the ballot either by signatures, or the legislators could decide, or the county council, city council could decide to put it on the ballot. Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yes.
Yeah. And actually, our preference is to do it at the county level so that there's consistency throughout a county.
There are 9 city councils across the state that have officially said they'd like the option to use ranked choice voting. 2 counties, San Juan and Clark County, are voting this November on whether to add RCV to their county charters. And Seattle voters are going to be voting on ranked choice voting in the Seattle elections this November.
So the Seattle ballot measure, we thought it would be interesting to see how many groups support ranked choice voting in this ballot measure. The other voting method that's on the ballot is approval voting. They are supported by the approval voting group, the Center for Election Science, and the Seattle Indivisible group, period. So approval voting is like when you do a doodle poll and you are deciding when to meet, and everyone checks the time that they would be okay with. When you use it for a public election, voting for more than one choice really hurts your first choice. So that's like the more approval votes you cast, the more you divide your support. So whoops, I'm going back. I'm going to stop sharing. This is really busy. That's okay. So yeah, we think ranked choice voting is the better choice for Seattle. It's approval voting is used in St. Louis, Missouri, and Fargo. What is that? North Dakota, South Dakota, and nowhere else. So there have been over 500 ranked choice elections in the United States and 2 approval voting elections in the United States. So, right, the approval voting people had outside money to gather signatures, and when they put it on the ballot, got enough signatures to put it on the ballot, the city council thought they'd better put a better voting method on as another choice. And so we were real surprised to have a third campaign to run this election. Any more questions about that?
Did that answer your question, Don? Or do you have follow-ups?
No, it did answer my question, but I would like to follow up by just echoing what Betsy Cushman just said in the chat, which is that the list of groups that have endorsed ranked choice voting in Washington State looks pretty liberal. We live on the red side of the Cascades. You know, how are we going to sell this to Republican counties in Eastern Washington?
Well, actually, our strategy was to start with Clark County, which is a more conservative county. So that's one reason we didn't start with Seattle. And there are Republican legislators who have been co-sponsors of the bills and who have were prepared to vote in favor of it. So Republicans in Seattle understand that the minority needs a voice. And Democrats in Eastern Washington understand that the minority needs a voice. So yeah, it is harder. It is harder because conservatives are conservative. They don't want to change things. but I think that they will begin to see that there are places where it can be to their advantage if the electoral system is not working to get the majority, the candidates they want. Utah is using it to, they say, like I said, they save a lot of money. There are 24 cities in Utah using ranked choice voting. And it was the Alaska Republicans who proposed ranked choice voting in the year 2000. So they've sort of forgotten that they were in favor of ranked choice voting at one point.
Yeah, and just one extra thing to kind of like, add in here. For, the question of like, any, conservative groups supporting it, the answer is like, is yes, the, Libertarian Party and, a ton of, folks from that contingency support it. And while technically, they aren't Republicans, like they are at least on the kind of like conservative lean, just to some regard. Does that cover it, Don?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess, so this is Betsy. I'll just add, when I look at that slide with the endorsement logos, if I'm looking at it through the lens of being a Republican, I don't see myself in there. And so I guess if you want to sell it to those folks, you want them to see themselves in there.
Absolutely. This is not a slide to take to a conservative group.
Yeah, we actually have another version of the slide that has a much more kind of trimmed down set of groups, and it's kind of trimmed to, I believe, Kit, correct me if I'm wrong, trimmed to just the kind of like more non-partisan, or not at least overtly partisan groups. Like a lot of the ones that are like, 46th district or Democrats, or 32nd district Democrats aren't on that other trimmed slide.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it definitely would be interesting to see how the 4th congressional district primary race would have shaken out if we had ranked choice voting. I'm not sure if Patrice's query about that, how that question would be answered, but I don't know if anybody knows, maybe if Katie knows, but we would be curious to know how that might have turned out differently.
Yeah, it's impossible to know because we just can't read people's minds, what their second and third choice would be. I have a question though, can I, before you wrap up? So when you're talking about the legislation that allows the counties to start using ranked choice voting, if a county did approve it, would that mean that every single race that takes place within that county would then be using ranked choice voting, or like every little town and the school district races and all of that? Or would each little jurisdiction have to do their own approval, like say the town of Winthrop City Council or whatever? So hopefully that question makes sense.
It does. It would depend on how the ballot measure is written. So each county can write their own ballot measure, although the mechanism for the elections would be consistent statewide. So if the city of Winthrop opted in, then the election method would be already prescribed, and so it would depend.
Okay, I mean, I'm just trying to envision the logistics of it. If some races used ranked choice voting and others didn't, the ballot could get kind of confusing. And I know that you say it's not confusing, but because we vote for all different things, it's just interesting to ponder.
It is.
Oh,
The
yeah.
ballot design is really important so that it's not confusing. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and on the flip side, Katie, we have a number of political districts that include part or all of Okanagan County, but also other counties.
Yeah.
The 12th LD, the 7th LD, the 4th congressional district. So
Yeah.
you could have districts where you've got it in some, anyway, that would be interesting also.
Yeah, it
if
sure
a-
would.
if a city or an LD, was in two different counties, you wouldn't be able to have a ranked choice election in one county and not in another. So that the entire race would have to be ranked choice voting. If
Okay.
Winthrop were in two counties, it would, both counties would have to be using ranked choice voting in order to use ranked choice voting for the Winthrop elections.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Patrice has a question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get my head around, like, I mean, I did a lot of talking to people before the primary, and there were people voting for Newhouse that were going to vote for Doug, but just wanted to make sure that one of the other Republicans didn't get through and go. And I'm wondering, like, I'm concerned that Doug would have gotten shut out if we had ranked voting against like 7 Republicans.
How much support did he get? Do you know what sort of percentage of support he got?
Okanagan County, he came in first.
He got 30%. I can sort of tell you those numbers. He got 30% in Okanagan County. Of course, that's a congressional race. So, we're a very small percentage of those votes. But yeah, 30%. And yeah, then the Republicans took the remaining 70%.
Yeah, he'd have to work hard to get some of the second choice votes from those Republicans.
Yeah, this was an interesting situation. We can talk about this at length later on, but yeah, because so many of those, every candidate other than Newhouse, the incumbent, was far right. There's not much difference between them, all super far right. And, and if you add up all their votes, they got quite a lot. They might have actually got more than 50%, or well, maybe not right together, but
Yeah, it's hard to say.
anyway, yeah.
Or if they did not make a second and third choice, then they would have basically dropped out of the running.
Yeah.
I guess I'm just trying to think, like, when I think of if we had a partisan primary, and so there was guaranteed to be a Republican and a Democrat and then, I don't know, any third and fourth parties, and then 4 parties, say, go into a ranked choice for, the actual election. That's one thing, but I'm just trying to see how a minority, candidate a minority party could ever get somebody into the general election.
Okay, so
Really
getting into the
part.
top 2 is one thing, but winning the election is another. And in order to get representation in Eastern Washington, you're going to need proportional ranked choice voting.
But something we need to remember is that, we keep going back to Newhouse's district. His district spans, I'm not sure, probably 6 counties. So realistically, the only way we're ever going to be choosing that politician is if there is statewide ranked choice voting. So I guess my question now is, can the state legislature in Olympia, pass this and force it on every county in the state, or do all 39 counties need to change their charters to allow ranked choice voting?
Well, the path that I see is using a ranked choice voting for the presidential election and the presidential primaries statewide, and then letting people see how well it works, because it helps each party get the best candidate, the candidate with the most support. And I would love to see that. I just don't understand why the Republicans don't grab onto this, because their party is so divided, and they're losing a lot of people to who just can't stand it anymore. So I don't understand why they don't love it, but I can see Democrats coming, and the 5 states that use ranked choice voting for their presidential primary, they're all Democratic primaries. So that's one path. I don't see the entire state using ranked choice voting real soon, but this is a movement that's spreading all over the country. And we hope, yeah, we're looking for a statewide ballot measure to pass the local options bill.
Well, it seems like
But
a
still,
strategy to get it out there and get voters familiar with it and see that it's going to work. Otherwise, it's just going to be this big giant change, which might be hard to implement, and more accusations of, oh, the vote was stolen, it's unfair. You know, you've all heard that. So yeah, it seems like a good strategy to get it started.
If I can just
but
say,
it does sound like each county would need to change its charter. Is that, if it were going to be statewide, is that the reality?
I don't know about the charters. I don't know if it was available statewide, if it would need a charter change or not.
I'm under the impression that it doesn't require city level charter changes. And to be clear, I want to be like as upfront to like, I could just be totally wrong here, but I'm under the impression that it's not that cities necessarily need to change their charters, but that at the state level right now, without this local options bill being passed, cities and counties like literally cannot even put it on the ballot to vote for it. My impression is that once if the local options bill passes, then cities and counties are able to then choose to vote for it if they want to. But right now they just full stop like can't really.
The exception being charter cities and counties that have it on the ballot now.
That and those are the ones that have their charter explicitly allows for it, right?
Right. Jason, did you have a question?
no, it was just more of a comment. I see that this ranked choice voting is getting more traction, nationally. I read a piece on CNN today that, had 10 different things that we could do to make our elections, run better, and ranked choice voting was one of them. And they had a good piece on that. So ties in here with, what we were saying. And so that was all I wanted to say.
Right, we were going to put in some links for someone and I forgot to write down what they were going to be.
I wrote them down. They're the links for people who want to play with their own mock ranked choice voting elections.
Great. Yes. I'll go. Okay. Thank you all for your attention. We'll go after some of those and get them in the chat. Let's see.
Does anyone
I have a
have
question.
any more questions? We're kind of bumping up against our agenda to wrap this up, and I'm happy to go longer if people have lots of questions. So does anyone have any more questions?
This is Karen. I have one. I was wondering what the most compelling arguments against it are that the opponents have been using.
When you ask for the most compelling, do you mean the ones that are used the most often, or do you mean the ones that are actually legitimate?
Legitimate.
Yeah. So and Kit and Jane, I'd love if you also chime in here, but to me, the only really legitimate argument that I've really heard against ranked choice voting is the one that essentially lets perfect be the enemy of the good, because there are other voting systems beyond first past the post approval and ranked choice voting that some people argue would be even more effective. And so the argument that we shouldn't do ranked choice voting because there's this other voting system that might be even better is the only one that's not just a straight oh, you're kind of unfamiliar with the field. But to me, it's still not the most compelling argument, specifically because I'm very much not a fan of letting perfect be the enemy of the good.
So there's also auditors have concerns about implementing ranked choice voting, and those are definitely valid and need to be addressed. A lot of them are addressed in the local options bill.
Okay, any last questions?
I
I was
put,
just curious if you could elaborate on the auditor's concerns.
okay, I put 2 vote makers in the chat. Oh, the auditors are generally very conservative. They do a tremendous job of keeping our votes secure. So this sort of a change would, it's been done many times. There's lots of support out there for implementing ranked choice voting, but it would be something new. It would be some work, and the auditors tend to overestimate the cost of implementing ranked choice voting by a factor of 10 or 15 typically. And some auditors are more open to it than others. The Washington Association of Auditors is officially neutral about ranked choice voting. They say they don't have an opinion on what kind of voting method is best. And some of them are a lot more open to it than others. Some of them are somewhat enthusiastic about it. I know in Whatcom County, our auditor, she's retiring in a year and a half. She doesn't want to have to do it.
I'm curious, do you know if the Washington State Association of Counties, known as WASAC, do they have a position?
I don't know. That's very familiar. I think we're working on them. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, our commissioners are very active in that group, and just be curious. Yeah. Okay, anybody have any more questions? We can wrap it up. Okay, well, Kit and Trey, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, I do have one question. This meeting is being recorded. Do you have any objections to me putting the recording of this on our YouTube channel for people to see?
No
You're good
objections.
with that? Okay, great. So we'll try to make that happen and get the word out so people can listen in later.
Yeah,
Okay.
and thanks so much for having us. And also, thank you to Jane for, pulling us in and organizing this.
Yeah,
Wouldn't have happened without you.
great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if Kit and Trey, if you guys want to leave the meeting, we're going to just continue on with the rest of our business, which isn't.
Let me just ask one thing. Is Kit still there?
I'm here.
Hi, Kit. I was wondering, how do you feel about me providing a link to the Cato Institute opinion piece recently, which, I think that's a wonderful piece, that it's from a conservative organization. It was written very recently, very favorable of ranked choice voting. So let me just put that link here in the notes. I believe I can do that.
Yeah, you can put
For
that.
those of you that are interested in a conservative perspective that's positive.
So John McCain was a big fan of ranked choice voting, and I'm blanking, but
It's been a long evening.
Justin Amash, one of the prominent libertarian folks, also a huge supporter of it.
And David Brooks, a conservative columnist, very in favor of it, especially the proportional ranked choice voting form. Thank you again.
Thanks, you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Good night.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thanks for having us. See ya.
Yeah.